Hi everyone, thanks for being here. Can I get a show of hands who is new to WordCamp? Who's this the first WordCamp ever? Wow, that's fantastic. Awesome. Welcome all you new people. It's fantastic to have you here. Can I also get a show of hands who has developed a WordPress plugin before? All right, no pressure. Okay. Okay. So the other people who didn't have their hands up, my assumption is you don't know how to develop a plugin. Okay? That's cool. I've got some other assumptions as well. So I'm assuming that you know what a plugin is, roughly. So it extends the WordPress core functionality. I'm assuming that you know where plugins live. They live in the WP content folder with the plugin name, and also the WP content MU plugins folder with the plugin name. And I'm also assuming that you know how to write functional PHP code. Okay, it's not as scary as it is, so we're not going to be talking about object-oriented PHP, just the functional stuff. So that's the stuff that you can find in the codex from WordPress.org. Okay, so you can cut and paste stuff. If you don't know PHP code, there's a link there. Code Academy, EN Tracks PHP. It's a 40-minute track, so quickly read it now. Good, right, we're all done. So let's launch right in. So a basic plugin file structure. What you're going to need is in your WP contents and /plugins folder, you're going to have a folder name. So the folder name here, we've got lc-wcbne-demo. The reason it's so complex is because it needs to be unique. Okay? Every plugin that you develop needs to have a unique folder name, and that's usually called the plugin slug name. Just exactly the same as you'd have a plugin, a post in WordPress. And that post has a unique slug. Every plugin should have a unique slug as well. So if first thing you think about when you're developing a plugin is what to name it. Okay? So we have here our folder name lc-wcbne-demo. So that is your folder name. And inside that, the single file that you're going to need to have is a PHP file. And that's got to be the same name as the folder name. Okay? So in our case, it's lc-wcbne-demo.php. So the same slug as a folder, but with .php on it. So that's really important because WordPress will look for that particular file when it looks through all the plugins. Okay? So that's the core thing you need to remember when you first start off. A unique name for your folder name, and then the single file within that folder name has to be the same name with .php. Okay? So we're now in that single PHP file. Okay? The first thing that we have to have in that PHP file is a PHP file. So we start off with the PHP code at the top. But the first thing that needs to be in that file is what's called a header block, a comment block. And this is where WordPress, when it looks through the plugins folder, then it looks through all the plugin folder names, then it loads this bootstrap file. And the first thing it expects to see is this comment block at the top. And this is where it picks out information that you start to see when you're in the WordPress plugins admin dashboard area. Okay? So we have some defines at the top here. Plugin name is the actual name that you'll see in the dashboard. Plugin URI is a link that you can click to within the dashboard, and it'll go off to wherever you want to go. You might want to set it to a plugin area on your website. A version, of course, 3-digit version. The author name, you might want to link that up with your WordPress.org username. A short description of what the plugin does, and this will come up in the WordPress.org repository, and it'll come up in the admin list at the dashboard. And of course, license. License is very important, especially if you want to publish it on the WordPress.org. Okay, so it should be GPL2 or above. So in this case, I've just put GPL3. But that's the minimum content block that you'll need when you're developing your plugin file. There are other comment statements that you can make. So if you want to have a look at some more, I've got a link in there to the codex. Go in there and you can, it'll list all the additional comments that you can put in there. Okay, so very important when you're writing PHP in anything, code-wise, some best practices. All your files, all your variables within your PHP and all your functions, they of course need to be descriptive. Okay? So when you're writing something, just make sure when somebody else is looking at it, they've got a rough idea of what it's meant to do. And it's also best practice to prefix all your variables and your functions with some sort of unique identifier. I've got a couple of examples just down below. So if you're writing your plugin and you create a function called savePost, that's pretty bad because when WordPress loads all the plugins, if somebody else has a plugin that has that particular function name, it's going to create a conflict. Okay, so rather than have something like generic like savePost, then append a prefix at the beginning. So in this case, you've got LCWCBNE, which is quite unique, underscore savePost. So chances are that another plugin probably isn't going to have that particular function name, and you should be all right from a conflict point of view. Okay. So if we look at a complete folder structure for a plugin, again, we start at the top. So we've got our plugin slug folder name. Right underneath that, we've got the bootstrap file. That's the first file that WordPress loads in. Then underneath that, we've got an uninstall.php. And I'll get to that a little bit later. And in this example, we've got our /admin that you might want to put the backend admin functions in. Of course, got CSS, images, and JS. We've got includes for any other libraries that you might want to put in there, and a settings folder as well, just to keep the settings stuff away from anything else. Now, of course, you can structure your plugins any way you like. There's no particular, you have to do it this way. Some people like to break out into admin and front-end stuff. Other people use different frameworks. It really is up to you, but you know, if you just try and separate it out in a most logical way that when somebody else looks at it, they kind of know what's going on. So for more best practice tips, again, I've put a link in there. There's developer.wordpress.org, and there's actually a plugins best practice page in there. And it's got heaps of stuff for how to structure your files and what to put in them and how to name them. OK, so we kind of understand roughly what a plugin structure is like. But of course, what we want the plugin to do is talk to WordPress. So before we talk to WordPress, we need to understand how WordPress works and how the plugins can interact with that. So WordPress as an app is an event-driven app. So I'll put a little diagram here just to make you understand what, how processes work in WordPress. So down the left-hand side, we've got a process, and that might be something like save post. Now, when you save a post in WordPress, it does lots of different functions. It does lots of different things. So it might update the content. It's, of course, going to write back to database. It might update the date and time and the status as well. And each of these are separate functions, events. Okay. Now, WordPress core allows you to hook, and that's what they call hook into these different events when they fire. And when, for these hooks, you can link these to your particular function. So when this process kicks off, every time the event happens, it will then look for a hook. And if there are any functions associated with that hook, it will run them and then return back to the next event. So in this case here, when somebody presses save post, it fires off the first event in that list. If it finds a hook, it will run your function, then go to the next event. There's no hook for that. The next event, hook your function, event, hook your function, and then event, and then that's the end of the process, and that's it done. Okay? So brace yourselves, PHP code is coming. So let's talk about hooks, but not these hooks. So WordPress has two types of hooks. Okay? So these are the ways that it interacts with WordPress. So we have action hooks and filter hooks. Okay? So an action hook is a PHP function that runs at a specific event. Okay? So if we look back to here, so event happens, and then the hook then runs your function. Fishes again. Good. And I put an example there. So add action is the action hook. It takes two parameters, the action name, which is the WordPress hook that hooks into that particular event, and then the callback function is the name of your function that runs. Okay, so an action hook runs something at a specific event. Then you've got filters. Filters are slightly different. they actually change some of the code. So when an event runs, you can filter into that event, take some of the content from that event, and then change it around and spit it back out. Okay, so actions just do something, and filters kind of change something. And it's a similar code, except this time it's add filter with the name that you hook into WordPress, and then the callback function, which is your function. So here's an action hook example. Okay. So this basically appends stuff before the end of the body. And we're using, one there, the action hook is WP_footer, which is called when WordPress loads in the footer area. And then we're linking that to your function, which is my_footer_stuff. And all that does, it's a fairly simple function. It just echoes a bit of text. Okay? So whenever WordPress runs, it spits out the footer, and then you'll see that bit of content at the end of the footer. So if you look at the WordPress core, this is the core WordPress code, this is where the action is actually being called from. So if you have a look at a WordPress template, you'll see WP footer as a function at the bottom, and this is where it's called. And the WordPress core function that calls these action filters is called doAction. Okay? And the doAction WP_footer is the one that you link into at the end. So when WordPress core runs that function, it will then do all the actions for WP_footer, and then it will run any functions that you have added an action to. Okay? So filters are very similar to that. And here's again is another example. So what we're going to do is we're going to add stuff to the end of post content. So that's your editor window. And so anything that's in there, if we run this filter, it's going to change that. So what we do here is we add filter the content, which is the hook, and then our function, which is extra content. And the function is right above there. It's very simple, except this time, because we're using a filter and changing something, we need something to change. So more often than not, filters come with a parameter, which you didn't have in the action hook. Okay, so it's just blank. See, the function is blank. So this time, we've got $content. And WordPress provides filters with as something to change. And in this one, it's $content, which is the content of the editor window. So what we're doing here is we're taking that $content, which is the post content, and all we're doing is we're returning it back out and appending something to the end, which is just a paragraph. If you didn't return anything, then your content's going to disappear. You need to continue the flow of stuff. So whatever comes into the filter, whatever WordPress supplies you with, you still need to pass back out when you're using filters. And here's the WordPress core for that. So here's the function called the content, which is WordPress calls when it needs to display the content for a post. And you can see at the bottom, content equals apply filters, which is the same as the do action, which then runs all the hooks that are associated with that particular content. And you can see there, the hook name is called the content, and it's supplying a parameter this time, which is the content of the post. So actions and filters, very important to understand that if you're writing plugins. So for each of these arguments, you actually have another 2 arguments in those. The third argument is a priority. By default, WordPress has a priority of 10. All that really means is if you want to run something before WordPress runs its core stuff, then you use a lower priority. So you might use a priority of 9, which means that your functions run first, then WordPress. Or if you want to run something after WordPress has done its stuff and maybe overwrite or change it, then you use 11 and above. Okay? And a fourth argument just specifies the number of arguments that goes into that particular do action or apply filters. So if you're looking at the apply filters one from back there, you can see that there's no priority and there's no argument, but the default is that should read the content, $content, comma 10, comma 1, because there's 1 input there. Okay, but WordPress adds that automatically. So priorities are useful in determining when your stuff runs, and arguments as well for how many bits and bobs you can actually change within those filters. Okay, so moving back to plugins. There's 3 major functions that all plugins do, and we can hook into those. So there's register activation hook, which is called when you activate a plugin from the dashboard. There's deactivation hook, which runs when you deactivate a plugin. And there's also an uninstall hook, which will run your code when somebody uninstalls the plugin. But here's a caveat, and if you remember back to the file structure I had that I showed you, there was an uninstall.php file. The WordPress core will actually run any code that you have in the uninstall.php file first before it runs anything that you've got in the uninstall hook. And that's just for integrity, just in case anything happens in your main program, it looks at the separate uninstall.php file first. Okay? So it's just best practice to put all your uninstall stuff into the uninstall.php. Okay. So here's an example of activation. Okay? So on plugin activation, you might want to set some stuff up. And I've got an example here is just writing a version number to the database. So your plugin might have different versions, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and this way you might just want to write out to the database so that at some point later, maybe when you update, you can check and then run functions against that. So it's very simple. We'll go to the bottom, register activation hook, underscore underscore file underscore underscore, and that's a PHP thing, and it just means that current file, which is lc-wcbne-demo.php. So it's telling WordPress to look at that file. When it's activated, then run your function, which is myPlugin underscore activate. And it's very simple. All it's doing here is it's getting a dollar version from myPlugin get version, which is a function that you've defined somewhere else, and then it's updating the database with that version. So activate, you set stuff up. Deactivate is when you want to disable stuff. Okay? So for this example, say perhaps you might want to remove some cron jobs that you've set up. That's a schedule system in WordPress. And you might want to disable some user roles that you've set up as well. But just remember that when you deactivate a plugin, it's not the same as uninstalling a plugin. So please don't go deleting options, because someone might just disable a plugin to see if there's something wrong and then re-enable it. If you go delete options at this stage, then they're going to have to set it all up again. So deactivate is not uninstall. So this example here, we've got register deactivation hook, the file again, and our function name, myPlugin deactivate. And all we're doing here is, if you look at the function at the top, WP clear scheduled hook is a cron job, and it's just basically removing that from the system so it won't run again. And then remove row security manager, which is one that you might have set up in the activation. So lastly, we get to uninstall, and this is where you want to clean stuff up. It should be best practice actually to give the users a choice whether you want to delete stuff out of the database or not. But it is good to clean up your stuff after yourself. So in this case here, we've got a little bit of code at the top. What this does is it looks for a PHP constant that we've defined, that WordPress defines when it runs. Okay? And if that's not defined, it dies. It stops running. The reason we do this is that when we're uninstalling a plugin from WordPress, we're within the WordPress context, within the WordPress application, which means it's already run and it's done stuff. Okay? So it sets up this WP uninstall plugin constant when you click on the uninstall button. Otherwise, if you didn't have that check, that means that anyone could type in the URL to your plugin and your .php file, your uninstall.php file, and it would just run. So it's just a security measure to make sure that this is only going to be run when somebody clicks on the uninstall button within the WordPress dashboard. So enough waffling, let's build something. So what we're going to do today is we're going to build a branding plugin. What this is going to do, it's something you might want to write for your clients. So we're going to remove the helpful login errors that WordPress gives you. We're going to add a custom admin logo. We're going to add something to the dashboard footer as well and replace the one that WordPress has. And we're going to remove some of the dashboard widgets. In fact, we're going to remove them all. Go for it. And we're going to remove the WordPress node. That's a little WordPress logo in the top of the admin bar. And we're actually going to add our own custom dashboard as well. So I've got all the code that's on GitHub. Links there, and it'll be up in the slides when they publish those. Okay, so setting up. So we're going to have a new folder called lc-branding in the plugins folder. We're also going to have an lc-branding.php file, which is the bootstrap file. And here's the header for that. So we've got our plugin name, we've got the version, it's GPL3, which is fine. And then we've got this little bit of code at the top, which is similar to the uninstall. What we're actually looking for is to see if WordPress is already running, so that people just can't type in that script itself and run the code. Okay? So we're looking for a WP Inc. Define. And if it's there, that's fine. If not, it prints out a little warning message to say, naughty, naughty, don't type this in directly, go and activate it from the dashboard. So here's what we're actually going to do. So on the left-hand side is your normal WordPress login. It's got the WordPress logo, which is lovely. And then if you type in your username and get your password wrong, WordPress helpfully tells you you've got your wrong password. Oh, it's saying the username Will is incorrect. There we go. So it's great for hackers because then they know that they've got the password right but the wrong username. So we're going to change it to our own custom logo, and then we're just going to put a simple, your login's failed, check your stuff, try again. And for the dashboard, here's what it looks before. This is the normal WordPress dashboard. So you've got your logo at the top and the admin bar, you've got all the dashboard widgets, and right at the bottom, you've got, thank you for creating with WordPress. Lovely. So this is what it's going to look like at the end. No logo at the top, one dashboard widget, and some nice stuff at the bottom, okay, which links out to your own website. Good. Okay, so bear with me. Cool. So here we have a fresh copy of WordPress, basic dashboard. We've got our plugin here. If I just activate it. Wrong one. Okay, so that's the plugin running. If you look at the dashboard, it has done absolutely nothing at all. And that's because I've commented out all the code. Okay? So let's have a look at the code here. Da-da-da-da. I hope everyone sees this okay. It's pretty dark. Okay, so we have the plugin comment block at the top. So we're giving it a name, LC branding, and the version, and the description. And that's the stuff that picks up in the plugins. On the plugins page here, and the version number, and the description, and the name. And there's the bit of code that says, don't call it directly. Please do it from WordPress. Naughty, naughty if you do. What I'm doing here is I'm just defining a few things. So I'm defining a version that I can pick up later on the plugin. I'm defining the plugin directory. So a couple of just an easy way for me to be able to get the plugin directory structure. I'm defining the plugin URL as well, so that I can get the URL side, not the actual file system. And the plugin slug as well. So these are just kind of standard things that most people would use in a plugin throughout your development. Just easier to use to get out if you define them. So first demo. So here we're going to remove the helpful information. Am I OK for time, Dion? Yeah. Cool. Right, so I'm going to log out. And then I'm going to log in. Yeah. There we go, invalid username. That's OK. If I type in, oh, password folder is empty, which means, yay, I've got the right usernames. I can start hacking now, which is great. So if we go back to the code, what this function does, I got an add filter here. Okay, so it's not an action, it's an add filter. We're actually changing something that WordPress already pumps out. So add filter, and the hook name is called login_errors. Okay, which just means that's a bit below the logo and above the input boxes where it outputs that message. So what we're doing is we're then calling our own function lcbrand, which is the prefix that I'm going to use throughout the entire plugin, just so it's unique. So lcbrand_login_errors, which is this function up above. And all it simply does is I could use the text that it supplies. If I had a variable in the function there, I could actually use that, pull it into plugin, change the text, but I'm not going to bother. I want to replace it completely. So all I do is I just return some output. So here I'm returning login failed, check your credentials. So I've uncommented that. I'll save that. So now, if I do the same thing, it just says login failed. So no helpful information. Hackers go, meh, and just run away. Okay? Simple as that. All hackers do that when you do it. So the next block. Here we're going to add the logo. We're going to change the logo. So the hook that we're hooking into this one is called login head. And that's the bit of HTML that WordPress spits out to put the actual logo up there. What we're going to do is, I have defined up here, I've got, I should show you the structure actually. Here's my plugin folder, so LC-branding. You can see here's the LC branding.php, which is the bootstrap file. I've got a README, a screenshot, I've got uninstall.php, but I've also got an image folder, and that's got one image. Okay. So what I'm doing here, I'm defining a logo URL, and all it's using is the plugin URL that I defined up above. So it knows where to go, and then the path to the image relative to the plugin file, which is img and then the image name. And all I'm simply doing here, I'm echoing, so I'm spitting out to the screen, some CSS. It's as simple as that. So it's a style, sorry, a style. So I'm just changing body.logging and login h1a, which is where the logo resides, and I'm changing its background. So rather than the WordPress image, I'm using our own image, our own login URL. And I'm setting that to important, which you should never ever use, but I'm doing it anyway just to override the WordPress stuff. Okay. So when I call this, it's going to run the login head action hook, and then it's going to put that bit of code in when WordPress runs that, and hopefully that bit of style should override the logo. So I refresh that. Yes, continue. There we go. So it pops up that instead. And if you have a look at the code, you should be able to see that. See, it's taken up the new CSS, the new style, which has been put into the HTML file. So that's that done. So that's just completely rebranded the login, and I can log in now. And we can start playing around with the dashboard. So, third demo is going to be changing that little bit of text at the bottom, at the footer, in the dashboard. So it's very simple again. It's a filter, and the action hook is admin_footer_text, and it's calling our function here. And all it's doing, same as before with the login, it's just echoing some text out to the browser. So again, I could use a variable and change what WordPress outputs there, but because I want to replace it completely, I'm just throwing something out. So all I'm doing is, when that runs, it's going to then replace that footer text with the bit of text here, which says powered by, and there's a link to our website, and then a little bit of text there. So let's see what that does. So at the bottom, you can see it's got thank you for creating with WordPress. If we refresh that, oh no, don't do that. Shakes fist at Windows 8. There we go. Now you can see it's powered by Line Canvas Awesomeness, and that links off to our website. So again, it's just a little branding thing for when clients are in there. Yeah, just gives you a little bit of exposure to them. But we can do so much more to muck around with this. All right, now we're going to start changing the dashboard widgets. Okay, so the dashboard widgets are all these things here. At a glance, quick search, WordPress news, which are all helpful, but you know, if we want to brand it and make it useful for our clients, let's start mucking around with it. So you can get these from the codex. What we're going to do is we're going to remove like the quick draft, we're going to remove the WordPress news, the activity, and the at a glance. All these are predefined meta boxes. So here are the codes for them. You can just copy and paste this stuff from my code. So first of all, we're going to remove the quick draft, which is this one up here. So we'll refresh that. That one's gone. Oops. And then this one. So we're removing the meta box that's on the dashboard called primary, which is the WordPress news. I'll refresh that. Oh, that's gone. What a shame. All right. Next one, we're going to do the dashboard dash activity. Refresh that. Nope, you have no idea what you're doing now. And lastly, the right now or at a glance, and that's gone too. So lovely. So now we've just cleared everything out. Okay, so it's not WordPress at all. Now we can start adding our own stuff. The other two I have in here are actually for two widgets, two plugins I had in our default one called WordFence, which is a firewall, and for Gravity Forms. That just removes their meta boxes as well, but they're not installed, so don't worry about that. So last one here is we're going to remove the little WordPress node in the admin bar. So we'll refresh that, and that's disappeared. Okay. And again, there's the function for it. So we're actually hooking into the admin _ menu action hook. And all we're doing, we're simply getting the global variable where the admin bar resides, and we're just playing around with it and removing that particular node from it just so it doesn't exist anymore. So it's fairly simple to do that sort of stuff, and it's all in the codex. Okay. And similarly, you can add stuff in afterwards. So we've pretty much stripped out WordPress from WordPress, and now we're going to start adding in our own stuff. So the last demo here is, now that we've got nothing in the dashboard, we want to put our own branding stuff, something useful for us from a marketing and sales point of view that we can start to add value when the clients are logging in. So if we'll have a look back, we have two functions here. The main function at the bottom here, I'll just uncomment it. What it's doing here is it's hooking into the WP _ dashboard setup, which is what WordPress runs when it starts to create the dashboard place. And this is where it creates all the widgets that you've seen before that we've just removed. So we've created a new function, and it's going to run WP add dashboard widget, which creates a new widget. Okay. So we've created a new name for this one called dashboard _ LC sup _ feed, which just stands for LC support _ feed. And then give it a title for the box. This one is news from Lime Canvas. It's going to be grabbing in our RSS feed. And then the callback function that it can do. So at the top, we've got a supporting function that actually grabs in our RSS feed from our website, and then it echoes it as a dashboard widget. Okay, so we're starting the div class here, RSS-widget, which is what WordPress uses for the dashboard widgets. And then we're also given a class of Lime Canvas. You can give it your own class. That's just so that we can start to style it if we want to. And then we actually create a widget, so a WP widget RSS output, and we create an array. So the URL is the URL for our FeedBurner RSS feed. We're going to give it a title. We're only pulling in 3 items. I'm only going to show the summary and the date, not the author. And then we close the div. So that's the basic WordPress way that it creates dashboard widgets, but we're just putting in our own information for that. So if we save that and refresh, yay! You would see an RSS feed, but it's not connected up to the internet. Let's just see if I can connect. Have I got enough time? Okay, cool. This one, connect. There we go. So that's getting our FeedBurner one. So I hope that just gives you an idea of what you can do with WordPress. You don't just have to have it to the default installation. You can start mucking around with things, start adding in your own value stuff as well. We've got our own RSS feed for our clients. We've got support stuff in there. We've got forms and stats and all that sort of stuff. So when clients log into our hosted websites, they've got all this useful information for them. OK, back to Prezzo, and I'll try and wrap up. OK, so you don't need to start from scratch. There's boilerplates out there. There's templates out there. I've got 3 examples here for you, although they are all object-oriented. So most people do OO stuff now. So the three boilerplates here, they do different stuff. So one of them is like a foundation. Other one uses Bootstrap and Grunt and Compass and Git. Another one's just the one at the bottom is just a kind of basic skeleton, but it's got a unit test, PHP unit test for it. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can just download these as like a starter for 10. And of course, coding standards, very important if you're going to be writing something. Just bear in mind it's not just you that's going to be maintaining that, especially you're going to be putting up to the WordPress.org repo. So have a look at the coding standards. There's a URL linked down the bottom at make.wordpress.org. Just make sure you read through that and you're doing stuff properly. Security as well. Whenever you're writing PHP stuff, never trust users. Okay, so anything that you allow user to input, just make sure you sanitize that properly. And again, WordPress has a great documentation called data validation for that. And again, if you're running requests, so if you're writing stuff that has to then do something in the back end and then report back, you'll usually see on WordPress dashboard, it's got _ do action, blah, 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 blah. Never trust that when you're running your back end functions. Always create something called a nonce. You can read up on it on WordPress _ nonces there. Essentially, it's a unique code. It's like a one-time code that you associate with your function. So when it then calls to your backend function, you can check to make sure it's the same unique token that was created to make sure it was WordPress that actually called it and not somebody else. Plugin distribution as well. There's a great link down there, plugins-about. If you are going to be putting plugins on WordPress.org, there are some restrictions and some things that you need to do. So you need to have, for example, a readme.txt, which needs to be a standard format, because the readme.txt is what WordPress pulls in, and that's what you see on the repository. Okay? So it needs to have a particular format. But if you read this page here, it'll just tell you exactly what you need to do to put it up to WordPress.org. So readme.txt, you're going to need to have it under GPL2 or above, and you're going to need to know how to use SVN so you can push it up onto the repository. So it's a little bit of learning to do, but it's all documented there. You can, of course, put it on GitHub as well. If it's GPL, you've got no problem. It's free anyway, so why not? Some additional stuff as well. If you are thinking about putting stuff up on WordPress.org, a good place to go is the make WordPress.org/plugins. That's where the plugin review team blog about stuff. So every time you upload the plugin, somebody will look at it and look through the code just to make sure it's secure and valid and everything. And that's the place where the team that does that blogs and writes about stuff. So it's worthwhile just to have a read through and see what they're doing. There's some tutorials as well. Tuts Plus is quite good. They've got a whole heap of WordPress stuff. So I recommend having a look at there. Also WordPress.tv. That's where all the WordCamp videos are at. Go to your local meetups as well, and of course these WordCamps. And if you're old school like I am and like books and paper to fill around, there's a great book called WordPress Plugin Development, Professional WordPress Plugin Development. And that one sits on my desk all the time, which is very nice. That's me. Those are the images I stole. And if you've got any other questions.
I'm really sorry to do this, but I'm not going to have time for questions at the moment, so you might have to grab Will after this if you've got some burning questions. But can I get you all give him a round of applause, please?